discussion on union budget. May I now request SIRC Secretary Ayapalli Venkateshan Arun and Regional Council Member Revadi S. Raghunathan to escort our today's speaker Pattabhiram sir and Ganesh Prabhu sir to the dais, please. We will start today's proceedings with the invocation of ICA motto song. Let us all raise for ICA motto.
यैषस्सुप्तेषु जाग्रति यैषस्सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्विमाणः निर्विमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तदेव शुक्रब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्वैता 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 एतद्वैता.
Thank you. Please be seated. May I request Arun sir to deliver his welcome address.
Good evening all. So today we have a budget session. So even though it is vote on account budget, so we have few inputs from our finance minister. So the full budget is we are going to have in the month of June or July. So before that, I will have this meeting regarding to this budget today submitted by our finance minister. So today we have our speakers Pattabhiram sir and Ganesh Prabhu sir and G. Shekhar sir, because G. Shekhar sir is going to join soon. Tomorrow also we have class by class analysis session for 3 hours, but many people is coming here. These people are not going to discuss, to know about what they are going to discuss. So we'll have T.G. Suresh sir and Prasanna Krishnan sir tomorrow. So I welcome you all for this budget meeting, and I welcome you today's speakers Pattabhiram sir and as well as Ganesh sir and my council colleague C.A.V. Madam and senior members. We welcome you all.
Yeah, thank you, Arun sir. It's my privilege to introduce both the speakers. The first speaker, C.A.V.Pattabhiram sir, is a practicing chartered accountant, a qualified cost accountant and a company secretary. He is the founder partner of Yoganandan Ram LLP, a public accounting firm. He taught over 76,000 CA students, written books cutting across genders and spoken at various conferences. He is into valuation and growth. Last year, 4 of his books were published. His book, Tech Phoenix, written with T.N. Manoharan sir, was nominated for 4 Business Book Awards. The book India into 2047, The Amazing Story of a Modern Nation, was well received. So was The Great Bank Robbery. His latest book is The Professional Guide to ChatGPT and is co-authored. In 2023, Rotary bestowed on him the Lifetime of Professional Excellence Award. With this brief, I have great pleasure in presenting before you C.A.V.Pattabhiram sir. May now request Revadi Raghunathan Madam and Arun sir to jointly present him with a shawl and memento as a token of our love and devotion. Our next speaker, CA Ganesh Prabhu Balakumar, is presently one of the partners in CRBS Associates LLP, Chartered Accountants, Chennai. As a faculty member, he has extensively toured to several parts of India to give guest lectures to members, finance professionals and students in goods and services tax during the days prior to the implementation of GST. Being the master trainer on GST affiliated by ICAI, till date, he has made more than 350 plus physical and 150 plus virtual presentation and trained more than 15,000 professionals and 30,000 students and other members in GST at various seminars, meetings, workshops and conferences. He is also a resource person in ICT Academy, an initiative of Government of India and other states. Also a most sought after trainer in various government training organizations such as NACIN, CGST Department, SGST Department, Regional Training Institute, Commercial Tax Staff Training Institute, which train government officers. As a member of GST study group of ICA, he has contributed to the development of background material on GST law, handbook on annual returns and technical guide on GST audit, developed by GST and Indirect Taxes Committee of ICA. Member of the Governing Council, and he was the immediate president of the International Chamber of GST Professionals, an association dedicated exclusively on GST and indirect taxes. He regularly writes articles in reputed financial dailies. He has won first place in All India 5th quiz competition for ICA students conducted by ICA during his school days. With this brief, I am presenting before you Ganesh Prabhu sir. May I now request Arun sir and Revati madam to jointly present a shawl and memento to Ganesh Prabhu sir.
Well, good evening to all of you. I think the Finance Minister of India, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, delivered what possibly must have been her shortest speech in the last 5 years. I think she spoke for under 45 minutes. I don't think Ganesh and I have any business to speak for more than 20-25 minutes each. There are three things that have happened in the course of the last 5 years. The first, of course, is the fact that India is the 5th largest economy in the world, measured by gross domestic product. The second is that sometime early this year, early this fiscal, India became the world's most populous nation, overtaking China and becoming #1 on that field. I'm not too sure whether that is something over which we must pat ourselves on our back. The third thing happened on the 22nd of January 2024 when India constructed the Ram Mandir. I think that is going to have very, very significant implications in terms of how India looks at tourism. So there are three things, ladies and gentlemen, of which I intend to talk. One is the achievements of this government across the last 5 years. I'm going to talk about 5 points there. I'm going to talk about 5 concerns that we have as we run up long term into the next 10 years. And I'm going to talk about 3 opportunities that India has up its way. That's going to be what I'm going to speak about. Maybe you can use it. I'll now take up part 1, where I speak on what are the things that we can be proud about. The first important thing, of course, of which we can be proud about is the fact that we are the world's 5th largest economy. It's not something that happened this year, it's something that happened early last year. But that's significant because in terms of gross domestic product, which measures the total amount of goods produced and services rendered in a country, India is world's number 5. We have joined that illustrious, can you move that? We have joined that illustrious club where USA is there right at the top, followed by China, followed by that very, very tiny country which was completely carpet bombed in 1944 or 45, Japan and Germany. So ahead of us is just the US, China, Japan and Germany. We are There are wide expectations that sometime around 2027 or 2028 or maybe 2030, We'll become the third largest economy, and estimates have been made that by 2047, which is the 100th year of India's independence, will be a $30 trillion economy. $30 trillion in today's terms. If you add inflation to that, we will be close to a $100 trillion economy. Now, getting there from where we now are, I do not know how many of you are aware, not that I'm questioning your ability to know, but I'm not sure how many of you are aware that it took us a full 60 years to get the first trillion. We became a $1 trillion economy 60 years after independence. The next trillion came 7 years later, the next trillion came another 7 years later, and I guess we should touch 4 trillion anytime soon. We are at 3.75 or 3.8, so I guess we should touch 4 trillion any soon. And 5 trillion, of which the Prime Minister once spoke about, is also on the anvil maybe in a year or two. So from 4 trillion approximate now to 30 trillion in 2047 is not something very hard, because it requires growth at about 9%. 9% is the kind of growth that is required, and I think all that we need is some guy, can you move that? Some guy who will do the math, who will constantly look into the Excel sheet to make sure that we are actually growing at 9%, because at 9% we should very, very easily touch 30 trillion. And like I said a little while earlier, if we look at current prices at that particular point in time prices, which means if we also add inflation, we would actually be a $100 trillion economy in that particular year. This is something that we should all be justifiably proud, and this has nothing to do with this government or earlier government. I've always believed that the growth in a country's GDP comes largely on account of the manufacturing sector, the work that the manufacturing sector does, the work that the service sector does, and the work that the agriculture sector does. I'm reminded of what my uncle, who used to teach at the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay, used to say. I once told him that what is the big deal about you teaching at IIT, and what is the big deal about IIT Bombay taking pride in its students, because you get the best and brightest guys to come to IIT, and of that the creamiest of creamy guys go to IIT Bombay. So what is it that you're actually contributing? And he said something which I did not appreciate or understand too very well then, but I understand it today. He said that you must give us great credit that we don't spoil them in the course of the next 4 or 5 years. In almost much the same way, so the manufacturing sector, the service sector, the agri sector grows. All that the government needs to do is to ensure that it does not poke its head too much and spoil things. We'll go to the second thing. The second important thing is that we are actually amazing when it comes to technology. Unified Payments Interface, UPI, or what all of us today crudely know as GPay, much of our transactions are happening on the mobile. And 46% of the global transactions are by India. And it is remarkable considering the fact that USA is so very high-tech, large parts of UK is high-tech, but in India you have everybody, right from the street vendor down to any shop, you can make payments on your mobile. Very recently I had been to Colombo, and I had great problem, where there is no GPay, where you have to carry cash. And I understand it's not just that tiny country, but many parts of the world where this has not happened. We are like that says, we are possibly the most valuable player of the digital world. And this again we must be very, very proud of. The move that started off with Aadhaar some 10, 12 years ago, and then the big technologies that took place, and today we leading the pack at 46% share is outstanding. The third important area about which we must be justifiably proud is about the solar panels, about how India is slowly, steadily and religiously moving away from the old forms of electricity generation to newer forms. India has had major thrust in this area. I'm not getting into too much of detail on that. I was very, very happy when today I heard the finance minister say that she is putting 1 crore houses under solarization, consequent to which they will get about 300 units free. That I think is just the starting point. That I think is just the starting point, and that would ensure, meaning this process, the kind of investments that is being talked about there will ensure that we would We like in UPI, we'll be possibly among the leaders as the world moves away from coal forms to the newer forms of energy. I must also confess, I must tell you here right now, right away, is that I did not wait for the finance minister to speak today, because there is nothing that she is going to speak that is going to impact what I'm going to say, because I had made up my mind that I would like to talk to you about the story of India. Whatever is appearing in red there is what we added this morning. Rest of the things were completed a couple of days back. What we added is what is appearing there as red in the morning. What I'm therefore trying to tell you is that those appearing there in red are good indications, good justification of the fact that we are actually moving in the right kind of direction. Point number 4, about which we must actually be very, very happy, is that India is emerging as one of the countries that is entrepreneurial in nature. We are of course nowhere near USA. USA and its Silicon Valley is just about remarkable. That's a country where it is so wonderful to fail. It's acceptable to fail. Or as Steve Jobs once famously said, he said, I failed spectacularly and was thrown out of my company in a very, very spectacular fashion. In our country, we don't have this culture of agreeing to fail, okay? Or we don't have this culture of believing that yes, we can fail. But the fact that there are lots of Indian companies that have now emerged as unicorns. Unicorn is about companies with a $1 billion valuation. $1 billion valuation is about 700 crores, or at today's price, 800 crores. That's not small money. That's huge valuation for companies that have been in place for under 5 years. We are looking at 111 such companies. India today has 111 such companies. Unless I'm terribly mistaken, the first unicorn happened in 2015. So the space of the last 7-8 years, we have got 111 unicorns come up in the technology space, whose market valuation is some 350 billion US dollars. That's a sign that we are beginning to innovate, that young boys and girls in India are agreeing that they must throw up their jobs and get into the entrepreneurial spirit. It is therefore actually wonderful that you see that red thing there, where the government has said that it is putting aside 1 lakh crore for research and development in the private sector for a 50-year long-term loan. 50-year interest-free long-term loan is something that's unimaginable. I still remember when I first qualified from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and was working on CapEx proposals, when somebody said that you have to make a projection for 10 years, I used to say 10 years, that's just too long. Today we are talking about interest-free loan for 50 long years, which basically implies that here is a country that is ready to look really, really forward. Okay, let's move on to the 5th and the last point that I want to make. Ayushman Bharat is an idea that I have actually loved. It came around about the same time as healthcare in the US came, or what is popularly called Obamacare came. I have, over the last 10 years, if not more, wherever I've had the opportunity to speak in the context of personal finance or whatever, I've always held that in our country today, or in our country, or possibly even in the rest of the world, once upon a time, the biggest danger was that one would die too young, and therefore insurance was important. Today, the risk is that one might live just about too long and without adequate health care. I'm not saying that this is going to take care of everything, but like the one that first came in talking about looking at 1 crore family, this is extending the whole thing to all those Angarwadi schemes as well. And slowly, I would like to believe, slowly this idea of offering medical care or ensuring our hospitals don't cost significantly too much, not just for the, the very marginally placed, resource-placed people, but also for people of the middle class. That I think is something wonderful to happen. So 5 important things have happened in the course of the last few years. First, to summarize, is that we have become the 5th largest nation in the world. Second is we are almost 50% market share in UPI transactions, which I think is remarkable for a country that opened up its economy only 30 years ago. Third thing is the thrust towards solarization could imply that, like in the world of technology, we could be a leader here as well. The fourth was The fifth is about Ayushman Bharat, and there was the fourth that I missed. What was that?
Unicorns.
The unicorns. How technology is sweeping our country. Okay, this was the good part of the story. This was the sunny side. We now have to look at the other side. The other side that can actually act as a, what should I say, brake in our ability to move fast. The first brake that I talk about in part 2 is about happiness. Okay. I once upon a time worked along with some people on a research project that identified as to when people get to be the most happy. Okay, it caught up on multiple things about the right kind of age group or the age at which one is happiest, etc., etc. I'm not getting into that now. I'm getting into the happiness index that has come out just a few days ago. Just like you have the GDP index, okay, just like you have got the biggest economy in the world index, there's a happiness index, and India is 126th out of 150 in the world. So that's not very, very good. We might have hundreds of questions on whether the organization that developed it is biased, unbiased. We can throw up hundreds of questions. If we don't like if we don't like the mirror that is being shown to us. But the stark reality, ladies and gentlemen, is that at 126 out of 150, we are really a very, very far cry from being a happy nation. Even the United States of America is just 15th on the list, which goes to show that just the presence of wealth, just the presence of GDP is not going to help. There are 6 factors based on which the happiness index has been worked out, and I think they are remarkable. One is about the kind of social support that a country has. India has very, very poor social support. The one on Ayushman Bharat is possibly one of the first early steps towards it. The second is the kind of income that you generate. Although India's GDP is substantial, its GDP per capita, because of the sheer size of the population, is significantly less. Then you talk about healthcare. I told you how expensive healthcare in India is. Although healthcare in India is outstanding. Then there is a concern about freedom. There is a concern about generosity, meaning how ready we are to support multiple causes is one of the factors. And the last factor that is looked at is what is the extent of corruption in our country. Very, very recently, only 2 days back, the corruption index also came up, and it's not something we can be very happy about. Point number 2 that I want you to look at is this population. I'm not talking about the fact that India is the most populous country in the world. That's one part of the story. Everybody and his uncle talks about the fact that India's median population is 29 years. Everybody talks about how India is having a demographic dividend, how India is a very young nation. But the fact that you are a young nation, while it is important, if you don't scale it well, can become a ticking time bomb. And the interesting fact or the risky fact is that in the space of the next 25 years, in the space of the next quarter century, India's median age is if you pick up 100 people, if you pick up the entire population, arrange them in the order of the age, and if the population is 100, the 50th guy's age is 28.7. Okay? Now that is going to move to 38. When it moves to 38, we are actually going to be older than the global average. The global average is going to be 36. What I'm trying to say is that the advantage of being a young nation is available only for the next 20-25 years. And as I think I'll tell you a little while from now, there is a lot of skilling that this population requires. Okay? We'll move 2 slides forward. Another. These 2 were the key things that I wanted to tell you about. One is the rising population. 2 is the absence of the very, very important thing called happiness. Okay? Because ultimately, though, as you progress or advance in age, what you realize is more important beyond all this is the extent that you can be happy. I'll now go to the third part, where I flagged 3 issues. I told 5. 5 is the earlier 2, but the next 3. One is climate change. Unless we are very, very, very careful, unless India takes the right kind of steps in this context, the concern about climate change is huge. Okay, it's huge. Some 1.5 years back, I had occasion to work on a book called India in 2047, where we try to look at how India will look like in the 100th year of its independence. There were about 20-25 people who worked on it, and one of the persons worked on climate change, and some of the findings that she had were staggering, and those findings have also been subsequently confirmed. Just to flag one item, if you are not careful about our climate change, there is a very distinct possibility that the sea levels in India is going to go up, as a result of which at least 12 cities will find a good part of their city go underwater. I guess you are picking up what I am saying. What I am saying is that there is every likelihood that if we let business run as it is, then in the space of the next 25 years, come 2047, come 2050, a significant part of 12 cities are going to be underwater. And one of those 12 cities, you know, is what? Chennai. One of those 12 cities is Chennai. Some of the few others that I remember off the cuff, part of Mumbai, part of Trivandrum, part of Visakhapatnam, these are all cities that we have grown up admiring, and these are cities that are going to go underwater. Let's move on to the second issue that I wanted to flag. This is about jobs. I told you about, what did I tell you? I told you about how we are a young nation. I also told you how we are going to slowly lose that advantage. I also said that being a young nation is like a ticking time bomb. Because if you don't skill that young population, then you are in serious trouble. Now, I'm going to give you a number which many of you know. We can disagree with the number, we can argue with the number, we can debate with the number in terms of its accuracy, but I'm very, very clear that the number is not too far off the mark. 40% of India's youth is today unemployed. 40% of India's youth today is unemployed. Those are not my numbers. They are numbers that come from the Center of Monitoring Indian Economy of the CMIE, which is possibly one of India's most respected private sector outfit that collects data and presents data. Now, we need to give these guys jobs, because if you don't provide them with jobs, or if you end up providing them with jobs like being a Swiggy delivery boy or being a Uber car driver, then that's not going to work. Why I'm still referring to Uber car driver, etc., is that in the course of the last 3 years, I've significantly used Uber and Ola as opposed to my own driving. And when I talk to these drivers, some of them say that they have done mechanical engineering, some of them say they have done computer science, one guy says he's done his MBA. While I would be the last person to question on issues relating to dignity of labor, but it's definitely heartbreaking when an automobile engineer says that he's now a car driver. So you need to provide jobs. The third thing that needs to be flagged is urbanization. Many people are moving away from rural India to urban India, and possibly rightly so. There is some reverse migration now taking place, but that's more at the cosmetic level. More and more people are moving out from rural India to urban India. That is going to that's already created a lot of congestion in urban India. And if you look at our traffic, for example, I live in a place here in Chennai. From there to come here takes me 1.5 hours. I'm not exaggerating. Even on the best of days, it takes 90 minutes to come. And I'm not staying too far away. I'm staying some 19 or 20 kilometers away. And if you imagine me traveling from where I live to, let us say, the further down part of the city, let us say, to go to Sipcot, down beyond OMR, it takes an endless period of time. So if someone is going to spend half his time in traffic, that's going to be a serious problem. I'm happy that the government is talking about housing. It's made a reference to housing. It's talked about how it's going to provide houses to people. Of course, that's a talk that it has been talking for quite some time now. There was also the reference that every Indian will have a house in 2022. While I would be the last person to want to quarrel as to why that target has not been met, because I understand meeting targets are difficult. What is important is that the governments are serious about it. So I talked to you about 5 significant achievements. I flagged 2 plus 3 issues: happiness, the second was population, the other 3 were climate change, urbanization, and the one before that was jobs. Okay, I'm now going to close out. I'm going to tell you what in my opinion are 3 wonderful opportunities that India faces. The first opportunity that India has across the next 10 years is to emerge as a global manufacturing hub. When the government first talked about make in India, there were many people, me included, who said, why should we necessarily make in India? Why can't we focus on make for India? Okay, there's a world of difference between the two of them. But the point is that over a period of time, there are many companies who have shown interest in our country, largely because of the sheer size of our population. We represent 1/6 of the world. So out of every 6 guys born in the world, or every 6 guys living in the world, 1 guy is an Indian and living right here in India. So it becomes a mass market. So India has every potential to become a global hub for manufacturing. India is also fast, rapidly emerging, not that it never was. It has been in the course of the last 20 years a knowledge powerhouse. We are basically the capital of KPOs. We are also increasingly becoming the capital of technology. So, and I don't have to tell you, there are at least 25 Indians who are the CEO of some of the biggest and largest companies in the world, which means that there is huge talent here. The third and the last one was the one with which I began. I made a reference to the Ram Mandir and said that it throws up opportunities. Now, if you are going to be the global capital for manufacturing, if you are going to be the global powerhouse for technology, you naturally will be attracting many people. And if we can create the kind of infrastructure, clean up the place, bring to light or market some of the many wonderful places that there are in India, spread across the length and breadth of our country, far flung, etc., we can also become a tourist hotspot. And if we manage to do that, then I think that 30 trillion in 2047 or 40 trillion in 2047 will not be a very difficult one. I'll just summarize what I said. I began by saying that there are 5 key things, important things that have happened in our country in the last 5 years, in respect of each of which we must feel justifiably proud. 1, we emerged as the 5th largest economy in the world. 2 is we are half the transactions in terms of UPI. We are, in terms of online payments, we are the market leader. Wonderful in terms of solar energy. There were a couple of other points that I also made a reference to. Then I spoke to you about 5 major concerns we have, starting with population, going through happiness, and then the last 3, one was climate change, the other was jobs. But despite all this, there is opportunity on the horizon, opportunity in terms of emerging as a technology hub, opportunity in terms of emerging as a great tourist spot, opportunity in terms of emerging as a great manufacturing center. All of that will of course require one of those important indices that there was in the happiness index. All of that will require freedom of choice, freedom of thought, and freedom of expression. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention.
A very warm welcome to all the members present here. Indeed, a proud privileged moment for me personally, chairing a panel discussion with my learned teachers, under whom I had the privilege to learn every single subject from the days of foundation. And today the SARC has given me this opportunity. And there is also one more challenge we always have, speaking next to Pattabhi sir. This has been always highlighted by some of the learned faculties. You have shown us the India 2024 from where it is to 2049. Coming back here, honestly, from the day or from this afternoon, once the budget is over, I have been receiving calls. What is there in the budget? You brief me. Now, in fact, it was a thought process. We all are aware it is an interim budget. It will not have much of proposals. At least understanding the method in which this particular government operates, if you carefully observe, every interim budget will be a plain budget. In spite of all these aspects associated with it, a one full page of 10 different points are being addressed, starting with the indirect tax has been completely fragmented. Having said the indirect tax being fragmented, it all was unified only through GST. And they never stopped there. The compliance burden has come down. Stepping from there, and the next aspect, be it the revenues has been doubled, the tax base of the assessees has been doubled, and be it the central revenue was increased on an average to 1.68 crores. On a very simple note, as compared to year on year, last year, this year's revenue is increased by 11%, no doubt. These are all points which are acceptable and appreciable. But there are certain challenges which the industry faces in terms of the implementation related challenges. Absolutely, no second thought. I do agree with the statement made by the finance minister that 94% of the learned industry leaders agree that GST is a need of the hour. We don't deny in terms of the implementation of GST, but there were enough challenges. And in spite of all the challenges, picking up the assessee after 6 years and asking him to comply, what was that day? On that day, what was spoken, God only knows. Because honestly, being appreciated by this law and had the privilege to appreciate this law from the day in which it has been implemented, what I myself have spoken in 2016 was not part of the law in 2017 when it came up. What was part of the law in 2017 was not implemented by the government. Government has its own reasons. I am not finding fault here in connection with it. But these challenges, having these challenges and saying that yes, the compliance is little easy, that is where I have my own concerns in connection with it. There are no much changes as we all expected. In fact, there were enough speculation in connection with there is going to be RCM on 100 crores above, 500 crores above persons, that no more small time payers will pay tax. In fact, I have been bothered when I saw this sort of an amendment or a proposal to be made. Why? Because when every responsibility is going to go to people who are going to deal with 100 crores or 500 crores. Already they are overburdened and they have upper hand in connection with many things. And what will happen to all these small-time SME organizations? Thank God, no such aspects. A lot of other expectations were there in connection with will there be an amnesty scheme, will there be change in the rate of tax, at least for EV. All these are all on the aspect and expectations. But very interesting to note, nothing made it up. In fact, from customs end, we had a lot of expectation. For a long time, one due was there for a customs front is amnesty scheme in customs, because we had in income tax, we had in service tax, almost all VAT laws, including Tamil Nadu government had, because it's something very real. Everybody had their amnesty scheme. Customs still does not have an amnesty scheme for a long time, and there are a lot of pending dues in connection with that. It was an expectation that yes, it will be there, and again, digitalization in customs in terms of filing of appeal, all that, nothing materialized this budget, but all this were part and parcel of the speculation. One of the recommendations of the GST Council came back in July 2023 was ISD versus cross charge. Is ISD versus cross charges mandatory or not? Wherein which we have came and concluded that yes, ISD is not mandatory. Somehow in the next council meeting, 50th council meeting, when they will discuss, they said no, ISD becomes mandatory. We have a new definition that gets inserted for the first time, input service distributor. No, not a very big change in terms of the definition gets inserted, but the revampification of section 20 of the CGST Act, the proposed section which is going to happen here is, what is that going to be the effect of this? As simple as that. I am not taking a very big example, a small example. There is an organization which has 2 registration, one at Tamil Nadu and yet another registration in Karnataka. They have an office in Chennai as well as they have an office in Bangalore. They run the organization. It was audited by a chartered accountant who is there in Chennai. Now the question before us is, where the chartered accountant is going to raise bill? Naturally to the head office. Now the question before us is, can the head office can claim input tax credit? All along it was a very comfortable yes. Because of the insertion of this particular definition and very precisely in the proposed clause where 20 subsection 1 there is a specific insertion. In case the recipient is going to receive a service which is also consumed by his distinct person, then the input service distributor registration becomes mandatory. Now the subtlest point over here is to claim this input tax credit of 18,000 rupees. I'm little vague here. Okay, 1 lakh plus for this 18,000 rupees. Now I have to take a registration and file periodical form, then issue one cross charge notice, and that fellow will take half credit and I will take credit. All along either the credit is taken and nothing is done. People who are all already aware of all these challenges managed it through some other model which is popularly called as cross charge. But these are all some of the challenges that we have in connection with this particular entry. This is the only amendment in terms of indirect tax that is being made. Further to this, using the powers of section 148, only for the goods that are always called as the sin goods, and for various reasons government is unable to control the cash and carry activity that happens in and around the business of tobacco, pan masala, gutka. They came up with a special procedure that because whatever government tries to do, this fellow always have a route for it. Somehow he breaks. Somehow he is not in compliant. At last they decided we will go by the number of machines that is installed, which is nothing not new. It has already been present at the earlier excise regime, for which a procedure got implemented. For the said specific procedure, they brought in a penalty which will be leviable at the rate of 1.5 lakh rupees for the said goods. But for these two proposals that are being made, a lot of expectations was there in terms of the budget. But being an interim budget, it just had a touch and go in connection with some of the provisions and laid us a very strong stone in terms of the indirect taxation, that input service distributor, preferably organization who operate at different states, having multiple GSTNs, has to be little more conscious, at least from the subsequent financial year, October, where their claim of credit in connection with it has to be challenged. So those are all the major proposals has come through this budget, but for which we don't have much changes in connection with the GST. So thank you all for effective and patient listening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you Pattabhiram sir, and thank you Ganesh Prabhu sir. May now request Revati madam to give her closing remarks. G. Shekhar sir has expressed his inability to join today's panel discussion. Sorry for that.
So a very quick closing remarks, as simple as the budget which was, the interim budget which was presented today. But first talking about Pattabhi sir's talk on economic discussions always interest me a lot, and I generally do not miss any economic talks. What was most exciting for me was sir addressed the what do you say, the everyone talks about the younger demographic dividend that we are experiencing, but sir addressed the fact that the population will be aging at a point of time. I just have a small query, sir. You should also spoken about the declining birth rate. If we link both together, we will actually see that the younger population, the population in 20s, 30s, 40s is not going to be actually younger, and the percentage of the children who are going to be available, the teenagers, that is also going to be reduced quite a bit. That was one of the most exciting things to hear from him. And the other is the climate change. Climate change is real. Climate change is actually going to impact us, and all of us are, I would say, blissfully ignoring it. We know it is there in the background, but we are blissfully ignoring it. It is up to us as professionals to also ensure that our clients are doing something, a small bit for the climate change, like how we also do. BRSR is being made mandatory, but before BRSR catches up, I think climate change is definitely going to catch up with us. I am not going to talk too much about what else, the other points which he spoke, but all of them are so relevant. And I am not a GST expert, so I will not insult Ganesh Prabhu sir by actually discussing the GST proposals or his talk on GST. So, should I close? Yeah. So, thank you very much everyone for actually coming here and joining us for this discussion on the budget, interim budget, which was actually presented by our finance minister. It's very motivating for us to see everyone come here to listen to all the experts who are going to talk and share their impressions, and this is what is actually going to help us also move forward and upgrade in our profession. Thank you very much everyone.
So with that, we have come to the conclusion of today's panel discussion.